Hi, Acadiana. Meteorologist Dave Baker here at high noon on a Monday. This is August 4th. This is Let's Talk Tropics. Hope you're having a great day. Hopefully you had a really nice weekend, too. Things are moving along as far as hurricane season is concerned. We left you last week with the National Hurricane Center expecting no new additional development over the next week. Of course, here we are 3 days later, and we have a tropical storm in a couple of other areas that we're watching. And, of course, we were looking at a lot of this last week, so really not surprised that the Atlantic is starting to wake up a little bit more. Those tropical waves, especially that low that was off the East Coast, was pretty certain that was going to get some development chances here. And of course, we've got Dexter, which is our newest and our fourth tropical system that we've had so far this hurricane season. No hurricanes just yet, but with 4 named storms, we are again just a little bit ahead of schedule, so a little above normal on our hurricane season. You can't write it off just yet. A lot of folks, the hurricane season's a bust. Whatever. It's only August the 4th, so we've got a lot of time to go, and the next 8 weeks are really our busiest weeks. So right now we've got partly cloudy skies. Really is kind of a nice day out here in Acadiana. 87 the temperature, but our dew point has dropped all the way to 70, so our heat index only at 92 at noon. Man, that's a nice day. I went for a little walk earlier this morning, and it really was a big difference with the lower humidity. I tell you, if the dew points could drop off at night, and we could see temperatures in the lower 70s during the summer, I wouldn't have any problem with the heat. For me, the heat in the afternoon doesn't really bother me so much. It's the overnight stuff. When I walk outside to get ready to start my show early in the morning, it's about 4:30 or whatever, and it's just brutally hot at that time of the day. That is where it gets to be a little bit ridiculous. So if we could have some days like this, I think I'd enjoy summer a heck of a lot more. Radar is pretty active off to our west along the Texas Gulf Coast. That was an area of thunderstorms that was up over Dallas earlier this morning, and that has made its way all the way down to the Gulf Coast. So go ahead and hit the play button on here so you can see the direction of movement. But we've got some dry air, kind of a ridge in the mid and upper levels here over Acadiana that's going to kind of block some of the development, but I wouldn't be surprised to see some additional rains coming in the eastern waters as we go through time because we've got low pressure right there off the Florida Panhandle. We've also got that frontal boundary that's kind of drifted here right along the Gulf Coast, right about in there like that. So again, we've got some of that drier air that's made its way into the region. So actually a pretty nice day here in the local area. But if you take away, you can see that there's a lot of rain off to our east, especially there over Florida and Georgia, and then the bigger thunderstorms that are sinking southward there over Texas. Not a bad day, though. I mean, look at the sun and clouds, a pretty day. Traffic moving along with no issues out there this time around. And as far as any boating, as long as you're in those central and eastern waters of Acadiana, not too bad of a day. North breeze is about 5 to 10 knots, and seas running about 1 to 2 feet. So this is what we've got on the map for us this time around. Again, you got the old frontal boundary that's kind of draped in this area, maybe a little bit farther to the south here, right along the Gulf Coast, and a bit of a low pressure area right there that is producing some showers and thunderstorms. Then way out here, this is Dexter, and that is also kind of along that frontal boundary that it exits out into the Atlantic, and then it kind of continues here along the Gulf Coast. So not only is there a low right here, but there's also another low right there. Then you got that low, which is Dexter here. This area here might have a little chance for some development, as the models over the last week have been talking about kind of a parade of lows that would move along that front. One is Dexter, one is off the Carolinas, and maybe that other one over Florida will kind of slide off toward the east. But right now, we're not expecting any quick development there off the East Coast. So focusing our attention more on Dexter this time around, it does have winds of 45 miles per hour. There's a very high shear environment up in this area, up to the north of it. So it is being sheared apart, and it's not going to be able to strengthen anytime soon. For the next several days, we think this is going to stay a moderate tropical storm, 45, 55 mile per hour winds at best. And then it's going to start to move out into the colder waters of the Atlantic and most likely be a subtropical storm as we get into the latter part of the week. It's not going to move too quickly, though, off toward the east. And at this point, it looks like Bermuda is going to be safe, except for for maybe some higher waves. Bermuda right there, that little spot there in the Atlantic. So you can see everything's going to drift north of that. But there will be some rough seas there in and around Bermuda. But for the most part, I think this is going to effortlessly make its way across the Atlantic and harmlessly, too, not really going to affect anybody except for some higher waves along the coastlines of the Maritimes of Canada and maybe out there over parts of Bermuda. And as far as it getting any stronger, again, with that high wind shear environment, very close to it, probably going to hold its own, may not get a whole lot stronger. You got a couple of models that take it up into the 55 knot range. That would be about 65 miles per hour. So that's still sub-hurricane. But the bulk of them keep it there in that 40 to 45 knot wind range. So that's going to be about 45 to 50 miles per hour on that other scale there. So we're going to pretty much watch that move off toward the east. And again, we've got one other area that's kind of being watched by the National Hurricane Center right about in here. Again, it's kind of along that front, and it's that parade of lows. There's the Dexter, there's another one there, and there's actually another one over here. So we'll have to watch and see how those react once they move out into the Atlantic. But again, there's a lot of wind shear north of that, and there's also some Canadian smoke from those big fires that's moving into New England and will start to move out over the middle part of the Atlantic too, and that could inhibit some of that development. But that's not all that's out there. We've got another tropical wave that's emerging off of the African coast, and as it moves out into the Atlantic, most of the global models have indicated some development. We talked about that a lot last week, and there's a couple of other let's say waves that are moving across Africa. They haven't made it into the Atlantic just yet, but big rounds of thunderstorms moving across the central part of the African continent will eventually move out into the Atlantic, and eventually we think there's going to be some new development there too. So let's take a little tour. Again, we've got the Gulf waters. There's a lot of sunshine here locally, but then of course with that low pressure area and the frontal boundary that kind of extends out like that, and you got a little bit of a frontal boundary there too. So we got some dry air locally, but a lot of thunderstorm activity there along the northern Gulf Coast, particularly to the east. So not as pretty of a day out in Panama City. This was just an absolutely gorgeous camp last week, and today you can see the beaches are empty. There's a little bit of gray skies and some light drizzle. Orange Beach also a little scarce there on the beaches. You can see some heavy rains there off toward the east. Dauphin Island a little bit on the gray side as well, and as we work our way westward, we start to get a little more sunshine over toward Cocodrie, and then farther to the west, even though we're getting some sunshine there near Galveston Bay and Bayou Vista, you can see those thunderstorms that came out of Dallas and are continuing to drift off toward the south. So you still got those darker clouds that are there off toward the west from Galveston. Elsewhere in Central America, we do have a tropical wave that's now moving inland here over Nicaragua, and that's going to bring some heavy downpours there to Central America. At this point, it's too close to land, so we're not expecting any tropical development there over the central part of Central America. Farther off toward the east, we've got a bit of a tropical wave that's kind of working its way westward here, stretches from Haiti down into northern parts of Colombia. And then you're probably noticing this complex of thunderstorms that's here. That's really all it is. It was an old tropical wave that was moving out of the Atlantic from over here, and it's kind of shifted its way in that direction since the weekend went through. But it's just a concentration of showers and thunderstorms right now. It doesn't even look like there's anything like low pressure associated with this at all. So it's something we'll just kind of watch. It's being induced by some upper level energy, I think, in that area. So we're not expecting any tropical development there. Meanwhile, out in the mid part of the Atlantic, we've got a tropical wave right about there, another tropical wave right about there. We've got one that's just come off the African continent, another bigger one that's a little bit farther off toward the east. The one that's coming off the African continent right now is going to be having a chance for some development. And then you see the circle there of those other thunderstorms over Western Africa. That's the next wave that's going to come off. And there are a few models that are talking about the potential for some development there, which actually is right on time. As we start to get into August, we really start to see more of these tropical waves holding their own as they work their way across the Atlantic, and a lot of times these are able to form into tropical systems. So let's real quick go through some of the models that we've got. I'm going to start out here with the GFS. And the GFS, first of all, we've got what is Dexter here over the middle part of the Atlantic Ocean. And again, I don't think that's going to be much of a problem for anybody there as it continues to move off toward the northeast. Eventually, I think it might even be pulled farther to the north. It may not even affect parts of Europe either. But as we go ahead and play this here, you can see how that low is going to continue to move out into the Atlantic Ocean. But I'm going to stop it here for just a second so that you can see that there's also this area out in the middle part of the Atlantic right there, and also that next wave that's starting to come off there. So kind of pay attention to those areas too. And as we go ahead and put this into motion, this is through the end of this week, and now we're starting to get into the weekend. You can see what's left of Dexter kind of falls apart, and also those tropical waves that are out over the Atlantic, according to the GFS, also tend to kind of fall apart a little bit. It looks like a little bit of a wave there and maybe a little bit of action right about in there too. So again, we're kind of watching out for the possibility of some waves that could develop. But right now, the GFS really isn't focusing on a whole lot until we get into about the middle part of next week. And if you notice there, right there near the Bahamas, you start to get a little concentration of low pressure and maybe even some of those bigger thunderstorms there. And at least on this particular map, it is showing a bit of a low pressure area here right over South Florida or perhaps over toward the Bahamas. So that'll be an area to watch perhaps toward the middle part of next week. But right now, it doesn't look like a lot of this is too there's not a lot of details on that. It doesn't look like we're going to be seeing anything developing, but it is something that we'll continue to watch. Let's go ahead and move along and get into the Euro. Now, the Euro model ran differently this morning, so I'm going to have to bring you the 6Z. And what this is this takes us out 144 hours. So it doesn't go quite out as far as the every other European model that we get. But you see there in the middle of the Atlantic, you see as I'm going back and forth here, that's Dexter continuing to move out of the way. But if we roll it back here again, you see that little bit of a wave briefly becomes low pressure over the central part of the Atlantic, but really it doesn't do a whole lot according to the Euro. And unfortunately, because this is the shorter range Euro, we can't see what's going to happen farther down the road. But I will say that it does appear that maybe that area of moisture is going to kind of slide in this direction and then maybe kind of pull off toward the north. Let me see if I can get that circle there like that. And that's for Sunday coming up this weekend. So that's just under a week from today. And if this were to develop into anything, I would guess most likely it would probably get pulled northward and shouldn't be affecting areas of the lower 48. Good news is even the Euro not really showing a whole lot here over the Caribbean nor into the Gulf waters either. Let's go into the Canadian and go ahead and roll it back here a little bit. The Canadian model seems to be a little bit more robust on developing tropical systems more than some of the other models. The Icon probably is the one that develops them the most, but you could see that Dexter moves away and maybe another low developing there over the Atlantic. Like I said, that parade of storms, and then you see more of a low pressure area kind of pulling out into the Atlantic, but then it kind of fizzles out. But then you see maybe another little wave that comes there north of Puerto Rico and then kind of pulls its way over toward the Atlantic coast and becomes a bit of a low pressure area. So maybe the Canadians onto something there. Go ahead and rewind it all the way back to the back, and we're going to grab the Icon model, which is the final. And of course, you can see that the Icon model, once again, has Dexter here in the middle part of the Atlantic right there. And as we continue to watch, we'll kind of fast forward this a little bit here, just put it into play and go through the different areas there. And you can see that that low moves in. Then you see a little bit of a low here across the Atlantic, and watch maybe another low kind of developing out over the Atlantic as well. So a number of systems at that point looks like one, maybe two, maybe three, maybe four toward the end of that. But the Icon is a little bit more robust when it comes to developing tropical systems. And again, this is taking us all the way through the week and taking us to this time next week. So by next time, or this week, next week, maybe a low off the East Coast, maybe a low in the central part of the Atlantic, and then one here about halfway across the Atlantic Atlantic from Africa, and another tropical wave coming off the African coast. So at least the icon is showing that things are going to get a little bit busier here. But again, that is exactly what we should be seeing as we start to roll into August. Of course, for this week between today and next Monday, nearly 100% or right at 100%, since we have an active storm in that area there off the East Coast. But also you're seeing some probabilities going north of 70% there of something to develop over the middle part of the Atlantic. The good news is most of these systems that we're looking at here probably won't be affecting the U.S. coastline, and probably not the Caribbean either. It does appear that a lot of these waves are going to kind of get in this area and then might start to pull back off toward the north. Now, it is going to be staying over some very, very warm waters, but we don't want it to get into this area because that's where the extreme waters are, where our Celsius temperatures, our surface temperatures, are there at 30 to 31. That's about 88 to 91 on the Fahrenheit scale, so definitely warm enough to sustain any tropical weather. But the other reason why we don't want to see any tropical systems eyeing the Western Caribbean or the Southern Gulf is that area right there where we have the tropical cyclone heat potential. So not only is the water warm at the surface, but the water stays warm very, very deep. So even a developing tropical system can still yank up some warm waters from below the surface and feed off that as well. And sometimes a weak tropical system can become a major hurricane very quickly. We call that rapid intensification. And the most likely areas are going to be where you have that high heat content that's in the ocean. And as long as you've got those upper level conditions that are favorable, sometimes you can get that rapid intensification. So the water temperatures and the tropical cyclone heat potential are really the things that really go for tropical systems trying to develop. Now, there are other things that inhibit tropical development, and one of those is the wind shear. And right now, there is quite a bit of wind shear off the East Coast. Remember, we talked about how Dexter here is in that high wind shear environment just to the north, and it's just going to be kind of following right along into that wind shear. That's why we don't think that Dexter is going to get a whole lot stronger. There is some lower wind shear here over the western part of the Atlantic. Again, that's that other area that the National Hurricane Center is watching. And then there's some decently low wind shear out here in the middle part of the Atlantic too. So that might be an area where we get at least some brief development here later this week or into the upcoming weekend. The other thing that really inhibits a lot of our tropical weather is the Saharan dust. This will be dropping off over the next several weeks. As we get into September, it pretty much disappears, but that's part of the reason why hurricane season really ramps up in August and September, is because the wind shear starts to relax, the air mass starts to moisten up quite a bit, and there's a lot less of this Saharan dust that would inhibit tropical development. So those of you who are wondering, we've only had 4 named storms, and here we are in August. And I know that over the past several years that many folks have gotten used to having just a tremendous number of named storms throughout. 2020 is one of those years where we got to August 1st. I think we had 10 or 11 named storms under our belt. But the last several years have kind of run a little bit more on average leading up to August. And then as we got into the second half of the hurricane season, things really blew up. But don't rule out, even though our forecasts are anywhere between, I think NOAA was putting 13 to 19 named storms, and I believe Colorado State had 16. That 16, let's just use that as the number. 16 is only 2 more than what the average is. So it still would be a busy season, above average season, but it wouldn't be one of these like 2020 where we had, I think, 30 or 31 named storms. So at this point in time, we have storm number 4. And you can see normally we get storm number 4 by about August the 15th. So we are running ahead of schedule once again. And usually the first hurricane comes on August the 11th. We have not had any hurricanes yet. So far, just tropical storms. But you can see where we are right now that we've crossed into the month of August. We're right about there. About halfway through the month, we're going to be there. And by September, we're going to be way up here. So the amount of activity compared to June and July triples, quadruples, and continues higher than that as you start to get into the early part of September. And as far as development, off the East Coast is one of those areas. It's a little more likely. You get these old fronts, or sometimes you get a tropical system that pulls north of the Virgin Islands and then heads toward the Bahamas and then starts to curve back out to sea. Most of our tropical systems during the month of August will pass through that particular area or this particular area here. A little less across the Gulf and the western part of the Caribbean, but that doesn't mean that something can't sneak into this area during the month of August. And if it does, remember that high cyclone heat potential is right there. So anything that crosses into that region is going to be something definitely worth watching. But of course, now that we're in the busiest part of the hurricane season, I know I've been telling you this like a broken record since June. But these are a lot of the things that are available at all of the stores, and you might have most of this at your house right now. Gather these things now and just kind of shove them in a closet somewhere where you know you'll be able to find those. And this is one of the parts of the list, and this is actually, I feel like, part of the busier part of the list where you're getting the stuff that you need, but you need to get it early in the hurricane season. But this is not including stuff like food and ice and things. That's another list that comes a week down the road, and then you got another list that's about 72 hours out where you start talking about evacuating and different routes that you would need for some kind of an evacuation. But this is what you can do right now when there's no tropical systems out there. Get these supplies that you need, and then you will be ready when a hurricane or a tropical storm comes our way. So these are just the basics. Of course, we've got other lists a week out and another one that is 72 hours out. But this is what you can do right now. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. I certainly do. Enjoy visiting with y'all on a weekday afternoon. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also turn on those notifications. And remember, you can hear my forecasts on Big 102.1, Planet Radio 106.7, and Freedom 95.1. And also follow my social media pages, both on Facebook and X. And thanks to everyone who subscribed to Acadiana Weather Today right here on YouTube. I'll have the update on social media on the new update for Dexter, which will come at 4 o'clock later this afternoon. Until then, I hope you have a great rest of your Monday, and I'll see you on Tuesday morning for Acadiana Weather Today.